my wife set us up. This is our like fancy background, like
Love it.
smarty pants background with the
It's
books.
great.
It really does. The notes, it's like
she's like, don't you get set up for meetings? I was like, no, I just do the meeting from wherever I happen to be sitting when the meeting time happens.
Yeah, you know, I've been like annoyed at this. So like Western Greek, whatever. It's just some bullshit buzz. And I think I'm just gonna do this now.
Yeah, I definitely look at that because it's right where your head is too.
And it's another head, and it's I've been getting really annoyed at it. So
I did trim my beard though for everybody noticing. It's only something I've done 2 times through the course of the pandemic. So
I think I put perfume on for no reason.
You know, I thought about that too. I was like, I almost did it, and then I was like, who's gonna smell it? No one's gonna smell it.
It makes me feel more like confident for like.
Yeah. Maybe I should have done it. Maybe I should.
I feel more professional. Yeah. But I'm in like I bought these pajamas.
I love them.
And they're like matching. But you can't tell that they're pajamas, really.
No.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have been able to tell if you had told me. I actually did wonder about whether I should wear proper pants, and then I was like,
I did wear.
My bottom half is pajamas.
All right.
Okay.
Let's go online. Yes. Where do I do this? Start webinar. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. We'll just give it a few more minutes before we start introductions as people start to trickle in. All right, I think maybe we'll start and people can join us as we go. First of all, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're really happy that you're joining us here today. I'm Mace, the programs manager at Warehouse 421, and I'm very delighted to introduce you. Oh, I'm really sorry to introduce you to our two speakers tonight. With us is Stephanie Comilang, who is an artist and a filmmaker, and whose documentary-based works create narratives that look at how our understanding of mobility, of capital, and labor on a global scale are shaped through various cultural and social factors. Her work has been shown at Transmediale Berlin, at Ghost 2561 Bangkok Video and Performance Triennale, Salts Basel, Tai Kwon Hong Kong, International Film Festival Rotterdam, and Asia Art Archive in America, New York. She was recently awarded the 2019 Sobi Art Award, Canada's most prestigious art prize for artists 40 years and younger. Moderating Stephanie's artist talk today is Murtaza Vali, critic, curator, and art historian based in Sharjah and Brooklyn. Murtaza's ongoing research interests include materialist art histories, eccentric minimalisms, ghosts and other figures of liminal subjectivities, and the weight of color and contemporary art of the Indian Ocean littoral. A recipient of a 2011 Creative Capital from the Warhol Foundation Arts Writers Grant for short form writing, he regularly publishes reviews and essays in various international art periodicals for nonprofit and publications for nonprofit institutions, as well as commercial galleries around the world. Murtaza is also an adjunct curator at the Jameel Arts Center in Dubai, where he curated the widely acclaimed inaugural group exhibition, Crude, which explored the relationship between oil and modernity across West Asia. Murtaza is currently part of the artistic team for the second Front Triennale in Cleveland, 2022, and a visiting instructor at Pratt Institute. He's also, as some of our UAE-based audience members know, a lead tutor of Campus Art Dubai and a lead mentor for the High Learning Curatorial Fellowship. Yesterday at Warehouse 421, we opened Stephanie's first solo show in the UAE, which was curated by Murtaza. Titled Float, it is the second installment of Murtaza's exhibition series, Substructures, Excavating the Everyday, which investigates some of the infrastructures that shape the spaces, contours, and rhythms of Gulf urbanism, revealing forms and networks so embedded within the Khaliji quotidian that they are commonly overlooked. Rather than the provisions and facilities most commonly associated with the term infrastructure, those related to transportation, communication, energy, water, and waste, the series focuses on those that might be considered somewhat more intimate or lively, those that mediate between public and private spaces, between exterior and interior lives, and between politics and the body, and that are constitutive and constituted by effects and desires, by labor and leisure, and nature and the domestic. In today's conversation, we're going to dig a bit into Stephanie's practice. We're going to look at the pieces that are on show as well as other pieces beyond the show, currently at Warehouse 421. Before we jump in, I wanted to note that there's a Q&A panel, and I wanted to invite you all to submit and post your questions as we're going through the talk, and we will get to all of them by the end of the talk. So without further ado, Murtaza.
Thank you so much, Mice. And thank you, everybody in the audience, for joining in. I see a few familiar names, people from all over the world, which is one of the best things about doing these things over Zoom rather than doing them in person. In person is that people who would like to attend and can't get a chance to join in. I just want to start off really quickly by thanking everybody at Warehouse 421, Faisal Al-Hassan, the director, Mais, Farah Al-Qadra, without whom the exhibition wouldn't have been up and running. And then I would also just very quickly like to thank Stephanie for working with us over the course of a year and a half to help realize the exhibition. So just to get started, just to give you a quick sense of the format of the talk, I'm going to try very hard not to talk. We are going to share some of Stephanie's work. Because this talk is so soon after the opening, people may not have had a chance to see the work. So we thought it would be important to show clips. We're gonna show 4 clips from 3 films. And we'll show the clip, short clips, 1 to 2 minutes long. And then we'll follow it up with a few questions kind of based on the clip or building off of the clip. So we're gonna start off with what is Stephanie's most recent film, which was produced for a project called Ocean Archive that was hosted by a kind of pedagogic and curatorial initiative called TBA 21 Academy. It was a film that was produced in response to the pandemic. It was produced maybe about a little less than a year ago.
Yeah, so it was produced last year in May.
And it very poignantly kind of captures both one of Stephanie's abiding kind of topics of research, which is the condition of overseas Filipino workers and the diaspora, or the Filipino diaspora in general. But it also really poignantly captured the kind of sense of isolation and alienation and kind of unmooring from all our anchors of time and space that we are all living in since this pandemic started. So we thought we'd start off with that. It's called Diaspora Ad Astra. Stephanie, if you want to go ahead and play the film.
Yeah, sure. Just bring it up here.
I can give a quick synopsis. It's basically narrated by a Filipino sailor, and Filipinos make up a large percentage of the people who sail ships around the world in the contemporary moment, and they have a long history of it as well. And it's basically him narrating his quarantine offshore, basically away from home and not being allowed to access it, not being allowed to return.
Malayo at malawak nararating nila. Kung minsan, matagal na wala silang nakikitang anumang bagay. Na ang pangkalawakang barko ay malapit nang makarating sa kanilang planetang sinapupunan. Pagkaraan ng mahabang panahon, nakatanggap sila ng mensahe nagsasabing hindi pa sila maaaring makauwi. Kailangan nilang manatili muna sa landas ng kanilang planeta at hindi sila maaaring lumupag. Tinanong nila kung bakit at may boses na nagsabing baka meron silang dalang kilalang dayuhang makakapinsala at makasasakit sa tulad nila. Ang mga kasamahan nila sa lupa ay kinakailangang gumawa muna ng inspeksyon. At kailangan din silang maghintay sa kanilang pangkalawakang barko ng 2 linggo para matiyak. Sa kwentong ito ng mga manglalakbay sa kalawakan, nakikita na nila ang mga kanilang bahay mula sa kalawakan, ngunit hindi muna sila makauwi. Kailangan nilang lumutang muna doon. Katakatakang nakikita mo na ang iyong bahay sa harapan mo. Subalit hindi mo naman maaaring balikan. Ako'y namalagi na sa dagat ng 7 buwan. Pinanaginipan ko ang mga sirena.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. Before we start with the Q&A, I should also say that the story that the sailor is narrating is actually taken from a anthology of Filipino science fiction, where the title of the film is also taken from. It's called Diaspora Ad Astra. And I don't want to state the obvious, but the idea is that there are parallels between the story being narrated in the film, in the story from the anthology, and his own current condition in the pandemic. So now to shift towards the conversation, Stephanie, I wanted to start off with a question about, I guess you could call it style, maybe, for lack of a better word. But one of the things that I found very distinctive about your films, and it is something that repeats in many of the films, is the ways in which you juxtapose or combine different image registers and formats. So the kind of like traditional horizontal aspect ratio of the filmic frame, which you often use for long shots of landscape, is frequently interrupted or literally split in half by sequencer footage that's in a vertical format that, you know, is the format of this selfie. It's the format that we associate most closely and has become very prevalent because of the use of smartphones and other digital devices. So I would, I'd like to hear a little bit more about this this kind of montage strategy or strategy of juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like playing with perspectives, and I also like using images and imagery that are familiar to everyone. So I like the relatability of images a lot. And so in the film that you just saw, or the clip that you just saw, and my film at Warehouse 421, I often will use, yeah, exactly what you said, these two images, these two overlapping imageries of, that's right, landscape, and then the sort of vertical phone footage. And they're two quite opposite and distinct images on their own. And then I like overlapping them because you do get sort of this like different perspective. The phone is very personal, and it's more, I feel more diaristic. You can, you know, you're holding it up to your face, you're speaking directly to it. It's not, yeah, you're sort of just speaking free, sort of like free flowing speech. And also what you're shooting with your phone is very personal as well. It's more like, you know, it's a bit shaky and raw. And then with this sort of like landscape, wider imagery that you see, it's, that is not all the time, but sometimes shot with a drone. So you can see it here. This is shot with a drone. And it's, you know, it's a wide angle, it gets a lot of the landscape because it's higher up. And yeah, I mean, I just really like playing with those opposing viewpoints because they're just so different, but they're also very recognizable to people because you know, everyone knows what drone footage looks like because we see it all the time now. Anyone can buy a drone and shoot whatever they want. And then we use our phones all the time. Yeah.
What I like about this, the clip that we showed, this kind of center segment where he narrates a story, it's this double kind of doubling up of the act of storytelling. So there is first the story that he's citing, but then also the way in which he's re-narrating it, that I think is also quite central to your practice. And you know, we could talk about it a little bit now, or we could come back to it a little bit later as well. The role of storytelling, and the reason why I'm bringing it up right now is because I think I'm just picking up on what you said about the diaristic and the smartphone, which for you at least I view them as being the conduits through which that form of storytelling, oral history is happening in the contemporary, in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I'll just, this diaspora ad astra is voiced by my father, and Lumapit sa Akin Periso is voiced by my mother. One, because I can I have easy access to them. And two, I mean, there's similarities there with ideas around migration and labor and stuff like this. And also I like working with them. It's fun.
Is your dad really an Elvis impersonator?
What's that?
Is your dad really an Elvis impersonator?
He is, yeah. That's actually the first, I made a documentary about my father called Children of the King, and it was about children of Elvis impersonators. And it looked at if there were similarities or differences between me and the other children of Elvis impersonators growing up. And so I shot in cities in Asia where they had the most Elvis impersonators per capita.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I shot in Tokyo, Bangkok, and Manila. Yeah. So my dad has been in other things of mine, and my mom as well. So you hear her voice in Lumapit sa Akin Periso. And
yeah, I think he posted an announcement for the show on Instagram. And
yeah,
I was like,
he's good at Instagram. He doesn't
yeah.
really
But you know that it was really lovely, because then in retrospect, when I went back and watched Diaspora ad Astra, him singing at the end took on a whole, you know, a new set of resonances and references.
I was trying to because I knew that I wanted to put a song at the end, and I was trying to get him to recall Tagalog love songs. And he was, yeah, it took him a while to come up with one, but when he remembered, he called me right away and started singing to me on the phone, and I was like,
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, the other thing I really love about this film, I mean, it's fairly short, but there is this kind of feel to the soundtrack, and this is something I'm hoping we'll talk about a little bit later too. A very fine attunement to the textures of sound. I think it was recorded remotely, maybe over cell phones or through voice messages or something like that.
Yeah, so I record the reason why it sounds so sort of staticky and crunchy is because I very simply record my parents from Skype or whatever we're using with my phone. So it's so it sounds like this, yeah. But it also adds to the film because you're sort of listening to someone far away from you, and that's how you sort of hear them too.
It also has that snippet quality that ham radios or walkie-talkies have. Each statement is like a discrete packet, and then you know, you kind of go between them. And again, that was something I only picked up on this most recent viewing. So maybe now we'll shift gears a little bit and speak and show a little clip from Lumapit. Lumapit, the full title is Lumapit sa Akin Paraiso, which translates to Come to Me Paradise. And it's a film that looks at a community of Filipino domestic workers in Hong Kong, and is narrated by a sentient drone who also serves as as a conduit or a vessel is the term she uses to describe herself, or an interface through which the women, when they're in isolation at their jobs, kind of communicate with each other, and then also communicate with their families back home. And we're going to be showing clips from the single channel version at Warehouse 421. We're showing a 3-channel version that is installed within an installation that kind of then recursively references certain elements within the film itself. So those of you who have the luxury to actually go see the work as an installation, I would highly recommend you do that. Stephanie, go ahead with the first clip.
noong isang araw na ang masama ay nagwakas din at ang mabuti ay malapit nang dumating.
Stephanie, I thought we were starting from the very beginning.
Sorry. Yeah.
Taga saan ka? Narinig ko ang sabi ng ibang mga tao. Yung mga hindi pa nakakita ng mga katulad kong lumilipad, nagtatanong nito. Pagkatapos, sinusubukan kong ilarawan ang lugar na ito. Noong matagal na panahon ako at ang kababaihan ay tumira dito, sa ilalim ng mga munting bundok. Kami ang pinakamalakas sa lipunan at mga tagapagsalita. Ginawa namin ang lahat para manatiling magkakasama. Pagkatapos, unti-unting nawala ang aming mga pamamahay, ang aming pinagkakakitaan. Dahil kami ang pinakamalakas, malis kami para maghanap ng bagong pagkakakitaan na pwedeng ipadala sa amin. Ang katulad ko ay mga sugo para sa mga kababaihan. Sa pamamagitan ko, na-upload nila ang kanilang mga pamumuhay na ipinapadala ko sa kanilang mga pamilya para maka-download. Kung anong dahilan, nang dumating kami sa bagong lugar, natanto ko na natatagpuan ko lang ang mga kababaihan kung sila ay magkakasama sa malaking bilang. Ang kinahinatnan nito at dahil ang mga kababaihan ay maaari lang lumabas kung linggo, ito ang araw ng aming pagpapadala. Itong linggo, tungkol sa tahanan, natagpuan ko ang sarili kong nag-iisip tungkol sa kanila, tungkol sa sarili ko.
Sorry, do you want to take a picture of that? Oh. We can't, your microphone.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that my laptop screen is so smudged that you can't really see anything. Sorry. Okay, so that's a kind of like a prologue segment to Lumapit that kind of sets the stage for the rest of the film, which actually in many ways is very, very distinct. And you know, the audience will get a better sense for that when we show the next clip, which is from a little bit later in the film. But I did have a couple of questions about this segment that I thought would be interesting to get us into it. So the film begins with what is essentially a prologue that focuses on a lush landscape that's punctuated with these kind of alien-looking mounds. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about where the sequence is shot and what drew you to it and what its significance is.
Yeah, so I was shooting in Hong Kong. I was shooting the film in Hong Kong, and I was going to go. After shooting, I was going to go meet my parents, who, along with like my whole extended family, were taking a vacation in the Philippines, and it happened to be in Bohol. So Bohol is an island in the Philippines that contains these hills that have these hills called chocolate hills, and basically they're all uniform sized hills in the center of this island that go on forever. You go to the top of one and basically you could just look out forever, and that's what you see. In the summer they become they turn brown because of the sun, and so they dry out, and so hence their name. And so because I was coming from Hong Kong, I had brought my drone with me, obviously, and thought it would be, I mean, it made sense to film there because the landscape is just so strange. It's a landscape that I haven't really seen anywhere, and it's also not very recognizable unless you know the Philippines, unless you've been to the Philippines, unless you're Filipino. But it's not something that, you know, it's not like you know, if I told my friends about it, they wouldn't really know, or like random people or something. So I liked that it was a little bit anonymous. I mean, the hills reminded me of scenes in Avatar. So it had this quality of being alien-like, really. I mean, I don't really know how else to explain it, but they're basically just limestone formations from long ago. Yeah, so they sort of are in the film kind of placeholders for another place, a place that that the women in the film used to inhabit and now don't. So I wanted a place that, you know, didn't look like a city, that didn't really have any people in them, that wasn't really recognizable. And so it was perfect. It made sense, but it wasn't something that it wasn't like a premeditated thing when I was shooting in Hong Kong. It's just something that I realized that I should do while I was there, and it would make sense in the film later. Yeah.
Was there, I'll get the hang of this eventually. Was there, is the kind of reference to this kind, a kind of matrilineal community, like, or utopia almost, that the women live within before they're dispersed, that Paraíso is also part of. Is that something that you developed from kind of local myths or stories, or is it something that that you came up with after the fact?
I think I wanted to keep it close to reality in terms of how the women were situated within Hong Kong, and so when you see them I mean, there's 300,000 women basically, so it's very gendered. It's a gendered profession. So I wanted to keep it true to that, and yeah, so it doesn't follow a myth from the Philippines. It just follows more like the story that I was trying to write. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously fictional because I include the drone character as being part of their community. Yeah.
Okay, so you've already touched on this a couple of times, but another sort of like signature aspect of your films is the use of this drone, which, as you mentioned, is quite familiar in some sense, but is also quite like distinctive, quite alien. Like when you see it, you recognize it as being a form of movement within the filmic frame that is not something that at least we were used to prior to its kind of widespread use. So could you, and of course the drone and a camera attached to a drone are technologies that emerged from the military industrial complex and are also widely used for policing and surveillance and things like that. So I did want to ask you what draws you to this specific technology, and also how do you think you deploy it differently?
Before I started making the film, I knew that I wanted a character in the film to be played by a ghost or a spirit, and I was thinking about what camera could embody that. What sort of like, what camera could I use to really to show that, to embody that, and so I was playing with a few options, but the drone seemed like the best option because, one, it was something that I could control myself, and I thought that was important. I didn't have to go through someone else to communicate movement or anything, and it was at a time when drones were they were still quite new, actually. But it was a piece of technology that I could get my hands on. So I wanted the character to embody certain characteristics, and I wanted to be able to embed those characteristics through the camera myself. And I knew I knew exactly what I wanted in terms of like shooting and like, yeah, and character. So it was sort of like, yeah, it was building a character basically, and the camera, and choosing what camera to embody that character.
Mhm.
And you see in the film that the drone, I mean, I use the drone like a drone, but I give it a voice, a female voice, my mom's voice. Also, the movement is, it's not, I guess, like usually when you think of a drone, it's shooting from very high up and maybe like looking down or something. But the drone is not super high off the ground most of the time. And in some of the scenes, it's actually on eye level to the women and to the characters. So I knew that that was something that I wanted to do as well, very low to the ground, sort of in a way like speaking or communing with the women. And there's a scene at the end of Lumapit sa Akin Paraiso where the women, basically the women are lining up to send messages and the videos that they've taken throughout the week, and also the photos that they've taken. Basically, they need the drone character Paraiso, because Paraiso's job is to upload and download these images back home to their family. So you see the women basically holding up their phone to the camera, to the drone camera. And then you see sort of like this swath of images go by of whatever they've collected during the week. And yeah, and that was something that I feel like the drone was the only choice that I had, I think. And it was, yeah, I think like embodying it with a certain character was something that I really felt necessary for the film.
Yeah, for me, the drone footage feels very, very different. It feels gentle and intimate and caring in a way. It doesn't feel intrusive, which is the way I often find drone footage when it's used in films or artworks. There's this lovely sequence where Paraiso is visiting two of the main protagonists in Lumapit, where they're sitting together alone, and she's talking about how their signals are so strong that although it's just two of them together, she can still pick up on it. And there's a movement there that you do where it's kind of furtive and it feels voyeuristic, but it's also narrating its own voyeurism at the same time, which in a sense makes it not as sinister. And I feel like that's something that happens across all the films, even with the intimacy and the way in which you kind of ambulate or not float around, I guess. The Jose Rizal statue, I get that same like proximity or intimacy.
Yeah, I tend to fly the drone quite close to the other characters in the film, so that they're talking to each other, or there's like some sort of communication. In the scene that you're talking about in Lumapit sa Akin, yeah, that was actually hard because it was so windy that day. So the drone was actually quite shaky. But yeah, it's true. It's like the drone was sort of not spying on them, but looking, sort of like recognizing them and sort of talking about them. But the drone was talking, Paradise was talking about them in this way where she was excited and yeah.
Yeah, there's something very endearingly childlike about that scene. Like I feel like that's a way in which I would operate when I was a kid, and I was like eavesdropping on something I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, I mean the signal strength thing, that I wrote in because that was something, that was an idea that I had in my head because well, the thing is, the Paradise can't find the women unless, in the film, she can't find the women unless they're all grouped, unless they're all together. And so on Sundays in Hong Kong is the only day that the women have for their day off. So they do congregate together. And so, yeah, fictionally in the film, Paradise is able to find them when their signal strength is strong. Mm-hmm. Hence the title, Come to Me Paradise. It's like, yeah.
So I think that strength of community, strength in community, I think is a good jumping off point for us maybe to show the second clip, which will give the audience a little bit of a sense of what the bulk of the film actually looks like, which is very different from the prologue. So do you want to go ahead and do that, Stephanie?
Yeah, sure. Let's just find it here.
Sa wakas, linggo na. Nararamdaman ko na ang malakas na senyas. Ibig sabihin, ang mga kababaihan ay nagkukumpulan. Ibig din sabihin na ako ay hindi magkakaroon ng problemang mahanap sila. Kailangang maalaala ko na mayroon akong layunin. Ako ang tagapagdala. Ako ang sakayan. Ang aking pag-iisa ay pareho sa ibang kababaihan dahil lahat ng video na ginagawa nila ay nakalagay sa aking taguan. Oras na matapos ang pagpapadala, ang bahay ay kumpleto na. Nasa sa loob ko pa rin sila. Ang aking pakiramdam ay may katwirang tugon na paglipat sa mga pinaalam ng mga kababaihan. Kita niyo?
Ang day off nyo dito? Ilang taon ka na dito, ate? Ilang taon ka na dito sa Hong Kong? Bago ka lang. Nice to meet you. Yes, ito yung hanap buhay ng ibang Pilipino kapag day off nila.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I wish we could show more, but you guys will have to go see it in person. So just to pick up on some of the stuff that happens in this clip, Lumapit has three main protagonists. Three in addition to the drone, in addition to Paradise. I was wondering if you could introduce us to them and how you found them and how you worked with them in the context of the film.
Yeah. So on my initial trip to Hong Kong to do research, which was just that. I mean, I just went and I wanted to get a rounder idea of what everything looked like politically on the ground. And so I just like spent time walking around and talking to women and NGOs and journalists. And when I got back from that trip, I was like, I think I had contacts. I'd made contacts, but I think in thinking through everything, the idea for me was to include vlog footage into the film because of its diaristic tone, and also because it's, again, so relatable. It's something that we all know and see all the time. And so I was actually searching on YouTube, and I basically just typed in overseas domestic worker, Hong Kong. And one of the women in the film that you saw in the clip there, Irish, has a vlog on YouTube. And so I was watching all of her vlogs, and she had basically a cache of videos talking about, some of them were talking about how to deal with money, how to save your money being a domestic worker in Hong Kong, how to send that money home, how to prepare yourself to come to Hong Kong. She also had videos where she was doing makeup tutorials. She had videos of her cooking, just stuff that we see normally on vlogs. And what happened was I contacted her and asked to meet her, and I wanted to tell her about the film, and so basically, and she wrote back and said, yeah, sure, just contact me when you come to Hong Kong. So we did. We met a couple of days before I was shooting, and she agreed to be in the film, and also she agreed to let me use some of her vlogs in the film. So this, what you just saw, she shot, but also like this, what you see here on the screen. So she does these things called ambush interviews. And so she'll just interview people, women on the street. And so this woman that she's, the woman in this clip here, she sells soft drinks on the street illegally because women there can't have other side jobs. But she talks to this woman who is not happy at her job. She wants to leave. I mean, just like stuff like that, which is so normal, actually. But yeah, so that's how I met Irish. And then she was like, I can ask Romelin and Lyra to also join, who are friends of hers. And basically, like, the vlog footage that you see is either Irish's or the women with their phones, because I had asked them to just shoot their daily lives. So at the beginning of the clip that I just played, you see Lyra getting ready in the morning. And that was just stuff that she had shot that I'd asked her to shoot. I mean, I basically just said, shoot your life. And then they did.
I think you already started touching on this a little bit, but I would love to hear you speak a little bit more about it. And I think this is where the film's relationship to the Gulf becomes kind of key. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the relationship between the women and public space, about kind of questions of access and agency.
Yeah, it's interesting in Hong Kong because it's already a difficult landscape to occupy, to create space for yourself. You must be wealthy to, to have space, basically, So the rules and the laws in Hong Kong tell the women that they have to live with their employers, which creates problems because on their day off, their one day off Sunday, they don't want to stay home because that's where they work. So what they do is that they leave their place of employment and then occupy public space in central Hong Kong. In central Hong Kong and in Victoria Park, the Filipino and Indonesian women are quite separated. There's 300,000 domestic workers in Hong Kong. 150,000 are Filipina and 150,000 are Indonesian. Yeah, and they're quite separate, actually. I think because of culture and language, but the Filipino women, I mean, they occupy lots of public space, but there's a huge number of women that congregate in and around Central and in and around the HSBC building, which is one of the main banking buildings. So basically, they're in the financial district. So they're squatting for the whole day from morning to night, these spaces which are normally used for finance. So during the work week, you see people in suits and ties, people with money. It's where the Louis Vuitton stores are. It's where big glass and metal and yeah, I mean, it's a city, and on Sundays the women occupy these spaces, and the landscape of Hong Kong is also really interesting because because there's no space, things have to be built on top of one another. So there are walkways everywhere, there's escalators, there's stairs, there's, and basically women are occupying this space because, one, they're covered, and so it protects them from weather. So in these spaces, HSBC building, walkways, the women create their own space, and to create more privacy within these spaces of finance, they build temporary structures out of cardboard, which protect them again from some weather, but then also give them privacy, some sort of privacy. Yeah, so it's this architecture within architecture, very different architecture, obviously. Yeah, I thought when I was there doing research, it was this was a thing that I was thinking, is that domestic workers, Filipino domestic workers, migrant laborers exist everywhere in the world, but this seemed quite atypical because of the landscape, because of the architecture in Hong Kong, and because of the rules imposed on the women.
Are they harassed at all during these days off where they squat?
They've been there because they've been there for so long. The government has left them alone. They've tried to clean up Central and Victoria Park, but it's impossible because there's no space there. And also, I think the Filipinas there, they demonstrate for themselves. They have agency and they speak English, so they can sort of, they can sort of fight back.
So just to shift gears a little bit, and people have probably picked up on this already, but references to science fiction are quite important in your films. But I'm struck by by how subtly the references are achieved. It's rarely through spectacle or special effect, which is the most common ways in which it's done in Hollywood, say. But instead, the alternative reality is suggested through narrative, through voiceover, through storytelling, through citation. And music and even song, I think, play an important part. As I was preparing for the talk, I was struck by how much singing and music there is in the films. So can you speak a little bit about how you use sound in your work and the relationship between sound and image?
In Diaspora ad Astra, like I said, the song at the end was a song that my dad had chosen. And how do I talk about sound in the film? I think for me, sound does add a layer of fiction or produces a certain energy that doesn't exist necessarily in what I'm shooting, which is a lot of it is sort of documentary based. And I really like that. So you can really play with that, I think. When I was making Lumapit sa Akin Paraiso, I was, I live in Berlin, so I was going to clubs, which has a very, in Berlin, the sort of club culture, DJs play really interesting music. So I remember going out and thinking about the film and sort of thinking about sound and what to use, and thinking that I would ask like a Berlin DJ and producer to create the sound for the film, because it did have this sort of, you can really place your finger on like what the sound was, and I really like that in a way. Like it does sound like, I guess, futuristic or something, but there's also something about it that you can't really put your finger on, and I think it goes really well with the imagery.
I'm aware of time. I'm wondering whether we should show the clip from yesterday, or should we talk about language? What do you think? You want to talk about language? Do you think we've kind of talked about it already?
Let's show a little bit to break up talking.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So just to very quickly introduce the film, this is, I guess in the sequence of films, it would be the second chronologically. It's a film called Yesterday in the years 1886 and 2017. And it's kind of a dual portrait of two protagonists or historical figures or people. The first one is a Filipino librarian and archivist who's been working at one of the national libraries in Berlin since the 1960s, whose name is Lourdes Lareza Mueller. And the second figure is Jose Rizal, who's a very important Filipino nationalist who wrote a novel while living in Berlin called, he finished his novel called Noli Me Tangere, which became a very foundational text for Filipino nationalism and anti-Spanish colonial struggle and movement. So we're just going to play the last 2 minutes from the film and then have a conversation about some of the ideas to come through in the film. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Ang pakiramdam ko ay nasa maraming lugar ako sa magkakaparehong oras. Ang pakiramdam na nagiging mas malinaw sa banyagang lugar. Ang pakiramdam na naipapakita ko ang sarili ko sa nakalipas at sa hinaharap. Pinikit ko ang mata ko at narito ako. Pinikit ko kabilang mata ko at narito ako. Sa isang punto sa ating buhay na isulat natin itong parehong tula na hindi natin namalayan. Ako, si Lourdes, habang nasa desk ako sa aking aklatan, trinabaho ko ako. Si Jose bilang isang panukala habang isinusulat ang aking nobela. Maraming mga bagay na nagpapanatiling magkakasama kami. Narito ang tula. Sunod sa araw na laman. Pumapasok tayo sa bagong espasyo. Naipit ako sa malaking entrada at kaagad ako ay ako'y inihaw. Etong mga kasaysayan ng mga villa ay nananaginip pa rin sa likuran ng mga shutters. Ang mga balkonahe nilang kasing pino ng mga engkahing gawang kamay. Ako ang kulay ng sunog na pinya, limon, mangga.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to try to wrap the two questions that I had on either side of this clip together. So one of the things is that as I was thinking more deeply about the films, it became clear to me that language is actually very important to the work, as much as maybe the technology of the drone is and the visuals are. And also, the fact that something that you already mentioned, these voiceovers are done by your parents as well, which I think is also very important to their effect, actually. It's something that you could easily watch the film and not realize or know, and the film would still be effective, but once you realize it, it becomes doubly so, I think. And for me, actually, the language of your films was one of the reasons, one of the things that really drew me to it. I mean, though I don't understand Tagalog at all, the sounds and cadences of it are very, very familiar to me from growing up in the UAE. To me, it's one of the languages that's very much a part of being here, or being there, I guess. And I wanted to bring that language into Warehouse 421. So if we're going to talk about substructures or excavating the everyday or infrastructures, I was thinking about these languages that are central to being there, but that aren't understood as being infrastructural, but are completely foundational. So I guess I'm arguing that language as an infrastructure of sorts. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about language, and then also both Lumapit and Yesterday end with a poem, while Diaspora, despite its kind of like heavy melancholy of separation, isolation, ends with this joyous song that now that I know that your father is an Elvis impersonator and I've seen images of him, I can only think about that. So, can you speak a little bit about language? Can you speak a little bit about poetry and speak a little bit about joy also in your practice?
Yeah, joy, that's so nice. In writing the poetry for both films, I like the idea of like having a machine write poetry. So I wanted to add some sort of character into the character. I wanted to give it some more than just, a machine. I wanted to give it personality. So I thought, well, why not, have it be a poet? So so I was playing with ideas, and actually a friend of mine, I had asked a friend of mine who's here, actually, hi John, who is a novelist and a writer, an amazing writer himself, to write a poem for me. So he wrote a poem, but I didn't like it. So what I did was I took a part of the piece that I did like of the poem and fed it through what's called a poem bot, which is basically like a site online that you can feed text into, and it basically spits out new text for you, a new poem basically. And so I got a new poem from that. I took out what I wanted again, fed it through the poem bot, and did this until I was happy with an edit. So I would add a line from myself, and then so it was basically I was like working with a machine to create this poem, which in the end, created really beautiful poetry and fit really well into both scenarios of the films. One, because it's sort of written, it's a collaboration between myself and a machine. And two, I sort of needed help writing the poetry myself. But also with just writing the film, like writing the narrative for Paradise, that actually comes quite easy to me. I find like writing from a different perspective or writing from a different character, a character that's not me, seems really easy. Also, a character who's not from my time or you know, sort of a time that doesn't really exist, who goes between time. Yeah, that seems, I can always write better like that. I find text comes really easy, the character comes really easy. Yeah, and that's something that has existed in what I've done for a while now in new work that I'm making. Yeah, this sort of fictional character, writing for a fictional character who doesn't exist, who exists in maybe the future or the past.
Maybe we'll end. Well, we will end with this question because we've already been going a little long, and I'm sure there are some questions from the audience. And maybe we can circle back to the question about joy through this last kind of summary question. But the exhibition's title, Float, for me references kind of a psychic break that happens as a result of migration, a kind of a feeling of being alone or adrift in an uncertain space and time that comes from being uprooted, you know, from your native land, language, culture, being separated from your family and loved ones. In Lumapit, Paraíso also refers to it as the disconnect, which I thought was a kind of like a lovely tag. But it also references, of course, this hovering aimlessness of the drone. Again, how Paraíso describes herself in the film. But then, upon reflection, I also realized that it kind of relates to a certain kind of lightness or levity, which I wouldn't associate with those conditions of migration or diaspora, but that I really feel in your films. You know, this idea that diaspora is a spirit or a ghost, or a kind of type of grace. This comes through in Yesterday, especially, kind of like wisdom or knowledge that's acquired by those who move, who are forced to move, and something that transcends a specific time, place, or history, or even body. Like in Yesterday, the narrator or the protagonist is the spirit that simultaneously manifests as both Jose Rizal and as Lourdes. It's the same energy or spirit or ghost or body, but it manifests in different material forms at different moments in time or history. So I guess, you know, this was just a kind of a summary statement, but I also wanted to ask you, since so much of the work is about diaspora, how do you think about diaspora? What do you think about diaspora? And then we'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, I guess I think a lot of my work has to do with ideas around home, notions of what home is, and that is something that I just have always thought about because my parents are immigrants, and so I think it's it's something that was just always in my head. You know, like what happens, the culture inside the house versus outside of the house. You know, like what. Yeah, it's just something. It's about like what that means. You know, like trying to really define what that means, and I think it's a question that is so complex and difficult to answer in one breath. That and this is it's something that pertains to, I think, all migrants, all immigrants, from the three women in the film to Rizal and Lourdes and my parents and myself. I think it's a common connection that migrants just have within themselves. And I think it's something that you think about constantly. And I think it's, there's just so much there to think about for me all the time.
Great. Thank you so much. We could talk for much longer. And we haven't even touched on our, the few times me and Stephanie have spoken over the last 6 or 7 months. The first hour ends up being about me venting my anxieties about all things pandemic related and her listening very patiently and quietly. But I think we'll switch over to questions. And while we wait for them to come through, give people a moment to kind of compose their thoughts and write something out. I will mention really quickly that yesterday is actually part of an exhibition that's currently up in Berlin or in Germany, somewhere else in Germany, at a space called, I love the name of the space, the Institute for Endotic Research.
Yeah.
And you can watch the film. I think the website address is tier.space. And so you can watch the whole film there. It's a really amazing film. I wish we had more room and been able to show it at Warehouse. And then Stephanie will also be giving an online lecture performance as part of that exhibition on the 9th, on Tuesday.
Yeah, that's right.
At 5 p.m. Berlin time. It's called Paradise Lives in the Ruins of Colonial and Dictatorship Alliance.
Architecture.
Architecture. Sorry, I must have miswritten that. And we didn't even talk about colonialism, so that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I think Mice is going to be sharing questions with us.
Yeah.
So if anybody out there has them, please add them to the Q&A. And
Yeah, we
Mice.
have a couple of questions already. And the first one is from Sri. Sri, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask it live.
Yeah, sure. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just thinking about, Stephanie, you were just talking about the poem bot. I was curious, firstly, like if you'd coded, said poem bot, but also if that mattered to you, like when you were talking about collaborating with a computer, like, how much access did you have to it, and like how you decided that, like, how much you could control of the methodology or thinking of this computer collaborator.
Yeah, good question. It was actually something that I randomly came onto on the internet, thinking about work, like collaborating with a machine. But this poem bot basically has a library of poetry books already there that I didn't really check to see which books it had in its library. I just sort of threw the text in there. So no, I didn't really I didn't like write this like, yeah. So it was sort of random. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have another question from Uzma. I'm not sure, Uzma, if you're okay for us to let you speak live, but if you would like to, you can go ahead now. If not, I can ask the question. Okay, go ahead.
Great. Well, I just wanted to begin by thanking you. I thought this was such a lovely way to kind of engage with your films, which I really enjoyed. So thank you for that work. I was struck so much by the collaboration. This is kind of like also carrying through from Shree's question, this collaboration with machines, and the ways in which machines are full, like you're actively collaborating with them, which I find so, it's kind of amazing and endearing at the same time. But another kind of major collaboration that I see happening is between you and the landscape, or the drone and the landscape. So it's almost like a three-way collaboration. And I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about landscape and the role of landscape in the ways in which you kind of create the stories and storytelling.
Sure. I think it's important for me to, well, what strikes me is first the landscape. You're right. Like it's choosing where to fly the drone and why I choose to fly the drones in these places. I mean, if you can come to my talk on my lecture on Tuesday, and I talk about that in the lecture. Yeah, a lot of the places where I fly the drone are sort of ruins of colonial architecture, dictatorship architecture, and those are the places that for me are very interesting, and have lots of things to draw upon there. So the architecture in Hong Kong, how the women use the space, the vertical landscape, how that speaks to also, this idea of being upwardly mobile and also using the drone in that way to shoot these buildings. Yeah, architecture is important. Landscape is really important to me. That's right.
Thanks. Thanks for
Thank
that.
you.
I think the side-to-side pan in diaspora achieves the same thing. You really do get the sense of floating in this kind of like infinite expanse of the sea. And Uzma might, if she can, will definitely join for the talk, because she's very interested in how drones can be used to shoot ruins.
Oh yeah. Any more questions?
Any more questions? We've already gone a little over, so.
Okay.
I kind of have a question from me,
Yeah.
if that's okay. And I think maybe I'll preface by saying that this is a question that sometimes annoys me if I get it in my practice, so I apologize in advance. But it's essentially, I'm wondering about kind of like your research or your ideation process, but specifically about how you think of kind of the act of storytelling itself. You know, sometimes you really kind of take charge of the storytelling, and other times there's this sort of like handing off. You know, you said, you know, you told the women to shoot their lives, or you know, you also even in the poetry you said, you know, writing from a different character, a character that's not you, is sometimes easier. So I am kind of wondering, at least if you've had to think about or navigate some conversations about like agency of narrating or the politics of narrating, as someone that is in a diasporic community.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking, actually. I'm not annoyed. I don't know. I feel like my hand in narration, you know, we always choose what to show when we make something. That's just there, you know, that exists. And for me, it's a matter of finding many perspectives and then putting those one on top of another. So it's basically, it's not just one truth, whatever that means. It's multiple truths, multiple perspectives, multiple angles, different cameras, things like this, which add to a rounder idea of a story. I think that's why you see so many different types of cameras and things like that in my film, because I'm just really trying to multiply the perspectives. And that's what's really important to me for telling stories.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Of course. So if we don't have any more questions, I think we can start to wrap up. Thank you everyone for staying through. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Murtaza, for this.
Thank you.
It is such a pleasure.
Thank you. We're very sad that neither of us can be with you in some
Very
ways
sad.
to perform.
Very
Yeah.
sad. Maybe I'll come though.
Well, we're here. We're here. We'd love to have you. For everyone else, if you are able and you're around, the exhibition is open, and we would love to have you. So at Warehouse 41. And that's it. And have a good evening, everyone, or afternoon or morning, wherever you are.
I did also want to just jump in is that we might have another public program coming up as part of alongside this exhibition as well. So please do stay tuned for that as well. Maybe in about a month or a month and a half, if it all works out. But again, from my side, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you again, Stephanie. I very rarely do this, but thank you for everything.
Thank you.
And thank you for your films and just your open and generous vision, which has really brought me a lot of joy in this last 2 or 3 months.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Okay, and thank you, Mice, for everything and for organizing everything and running everything so smoothly.
Yes.
My pleasure. Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.